They shared a night, then discovered the law would never forgive it. The airport existed in a state of suspended intention. Flights were delayed without explanation, screens refreshed without answers, and people moved as if time had loosened its grip on them. It was neither departure nor arrival, but something in between, a neutral zone where identities softened and urgency blurred. Julia stood in line at the coffee kiosk, coat still on, case balanced against her ankle. She had stopped checking her phone 10 minutes ago. There was nothing more she could do about the hearing prep now, nothing she could revise in her head without turning it into noise. She hated wasted time, but airports specialized in it. Behind her, a voice cut through the low mechanical hum. They always say technical reasons, the man said, not to her directly, but clearly not to himself either. As if that explains anything. Julia turned slightly, more out of reflex than interest. He was tall, unshaven in a way that suggested neglect rather than style, glasses pushed up into his hair. Not dressed for business, not dressed for comfort. Somewhere between. They could say we don't know, she replied. At least that would be honest. He smiled, not polite, not flirtatious. Curious. That would imply accountability, he said. Airports avoid that concept. She almost smiled back. Almost. They took 2 steps forward as the line advanced. Silence settled. Not awkward, simply unoccupied. Julia noticed his hands, long fingers, restless, as if they were used to holding instruments rather than cups. He noticed the way she stood, weight evenly distributed, posture trained, alert even in stillness. You sound like someone who deals with systems, he said. So do you, she answered. Guilty, he said. I study how they fail. That earned her full attention. On purpose, she asked. Usually unintentionally, he said. Which is worse? Their coffees arrived. They moved aside without coordination, ending up at the same narrow standing table by the window overlooking the runway. Outside, rain streaked the glass, blurring planes into pale shapes. I'm Mark, he said, after a pause that felt deliberate. She considered giving her last name. Dismissed the impulse. Julia. No professions followed. No clarifying questions. It felt like an unspoken agreement. Whatever they were here, it stayed outside this delay. They talked. Not small talk, analysis. About risk thresholds. About how institutions measure harm only after it becomes statistically inconvenient. About responsibility diffused until it disappears. Julia found herself saying things she usually only articulated internally, sharpening arguments she never voiced aloud. Mark listened the way academics rarely do, not waiting for his turn, but testing her logic in real time. You don't sound neutral, he said at one point. Neutrality is a luxury, she replied. It's usually paid for by someone else. He studied her for a second longer than necessary. And yet you believe in it. I believe in rules, she said, even when they hurt. That was the moment something shifted, not attraction yet, but recognition. The sense of encountering a mind that didn't need to be impressed or managed. The announcement came suddenly, another delay. Groans rippled through the terminal. Mark checked the board, then laughed quietly. Looks like we're stuck. Gray zone, Julia said. Yes, he agreed. Exactly that. They moved to the bar without discussing it. Wine replaced coffee. The conversation loosened but didn't lose its edge. The lights dimmed imperceptibly as evening pressed against the windows. You never told me what system you work in, Mark said. You never told me yours, Julia replied. He lifted his glass in acknowledgement. Fair. There was a moment, small, precise, when silence returned, heavier this time. Not absence, but pressure. The awareness of proximity. Of choice. Julia felt it before she allowed herself to analyze it. The familiar warning signal rose, the one she usually trusted. She ignored it. The hotel shuttle smelled faintly of disinfectant and rain-soaked fabric. They sat apart at first, knees nearly touching. By the third red light, Mark's hand brushed hers. Not accidental, not forced. She didn't pull away. The room was impersonal in the way only airport hotels could be. Neutral art. Overcleaned surfaces. A place designed to be forgotten. They didn't talk much there. What passed between them wasn't reckless, but it was unguarded. The kind of intimacy that comes from shared language rather than shared history. It felt temporary by design, insulated from consequence by anonymity. Later, lying awake while Mark slept beside her, Julia stared at the ceiling and cataloged nothing. No names. No details. No context. She let the moment exist without filing it. In the morning, they parted without promises. No numbers exchanged. No plans made. Just a nod. A look that acknowledged what had happened without assigning it meaning. Julia walked back into the terminal alone, coat buttoned, face composed. The gray zone closed behind her. She did not know yet that it would reopen inside a courtroom. The courtroom smelled faintly of polished wood and recycled air. Julia stood behind the prosecution table, fingers resting on a neatly stacked folder she already knew by heart. The case had weight, not just in public interest, but in precedent. Biopharm Solutions had money, time, and an army of attorneys. What they did not have, at least not yet, was immunity. The gallery filled slowly. Reporters murmured. A low electrical tension hummed beneath the surface, anticipation sharpened by rumor. 3 unexplained patient deaths during late-stage trials were not something the public ignored easily. Julia adjusted her glasses and focused on procedure. Names, seating, order. Then the defense entered. She registered the lead counsel first. Expensive suit, neutral expression, the practiced calm of someone who had never doubted the outcome of a case in his life. And then she saw him. Mark sat 2 seats behind the counsel table, a slim leather folder on his lap, posture straight but guarded. Clean-shaven now, hair trimmed, a man prepared to be credible. For a fraction of a second, Julia's mind refused to integrate the image. Her body reacted faster. A tightening behind the sternum. A shallow intake of breath she immediately corrected. Her fingers pressed harder against the folder, knuckles whitening before she consciously relaxed them. Mark looked up. Their eyes met. There was no confusion in his, only recognition, followed instantly by calculation. The smallest tightening at the corner of his mouth betrayed it. He understood the implications before she did. Julia broke eye contact first. The judge entered. Everyone rose. The ritual of authority reasserted itself, indifferent to private catastrophe. As she delivered her opening formalities, Julia felt the words come out of her mouth with professional precision, even as her mind worked in parallel, assembling damage assessments at speed. Conflict of interest. Failure to disclose prior personal contact. Grounds for mistrial. The legal language surfaced uninvited, automatic, merciless. When the defense introduced their expert witness, the name landed like a controlled detonation. Dr. Mark Ellison, the defense counsel said. Senior research scientist, Biopharm Solutions. Julia kept her face neutral. She did not look at him again. Dr. Ellison's credentials were impeccable. Publications, grants, advisory board positions. Exactly the kind of expert juries trusted because they did not understand him well enough to question his authority. As the hearing adjourned for a brief recess, the room loosened. Chairs scraped. Conversations resumed. Julia gathered her papers with deliberate slowness. She needed distance. Air. A private moment to regain internal alignment. She did not make it as far as she intended. The restroom was empty except for the low hum of ventilation and the harsh fluorescence of the mirrors. Julia splashed cold water on her wrists, grounding herself in sensation rather than thought. The door opened behind her. She did not turn immediately. She knew. Julia, Mark said quietly. She faced him then, expression hard set, professional armor locked firmly into place. This is not appropriate, she said. I know, he replied. But we need to talk. No, she corrected. You need to leave. He closed the door anyway, not locking it, just reducing exposure. His hands were visible, palms open. A scientist's instinct. Show there is no weapon. I didn't know who you were, he said. Not until this morning. Her laugh was short, humorless. That's supposed to help? It's the truth. The truth, she said, stepping closer, lowering her voice, is that if anyone finds out we had personal contact prior to this proceeding, this case collapses. Not weakens. Collapses. I understand what mistrial means, he said. Then you understand what you've done. What we did, he corrected, gently. She froze him with a look sharp enough to end the conversation. Do not dilute responsibility. Silence stretched. The ventilation hummed on. I never would have agreed to testify if I'd known, he said. I was subpoenaed after the fact. That gave her pause. Not relief, but recalibration. Subpoena meant limited maneuverability. Limited, not non-existent. You should have disclosed the encounter once you realized, she said. And destroy you? His voice dropped. I saw the way you looked at me in there. You knew instantly what it would cost. That was true. She hated him for seeing it. This doesn't change the rules, she said. From this moment on, we do not acknowledge each other outside the courtroom. We do not communicate. We do not exist in the same reality. And the case? He asked. The case proceeds as if we've never met. He hesitated. That's a lie. It's a necessary one, she said. And it's the only way this doesn't end with you dismissed and me disbarred. He nodded slowly. Not in agreement, understanding. As he reached for the door, she added, if you contact me again, I will recuse myself immediately. He stopped with his hand on the handle. There are things I can't say on the stand, he said, not turning around. Her jaw tightened. Then don't. That doesn't mean they don't matter. He left before she could respond. Julia remained standing in the harsh light, pulse steady now, decision locked in. She had compartmentalized crises before. This was simply larger. What she did not yet know was that compartmentalization would not be enough. That evening, alone in her apartment, she opened her laptop to review the next day's witness strategy. A new email sat in her inbox. No sender name. No subject line. One attachment. Her cursor hovered for a long moment before she clicked. The file name meant nothing. The contents changed everything. Juliet did not open the attachment immediately. She saved it to an encrypted folder, disconnected from the network, and only then allowed herself to look. Discipline first. Emotion later. The document was not a smoking gun. No logos. No signatures. No explicit admissions. It was worse than that. Raw data tables, internal test identifiers, timelines that did not align with the version submitted to regulators. She recognized the structure instantly. Someone had altered outcomes. Not fabricated wholesale, adjusted, smoothed, shifted just enough to pass safety thresholds without triggering alarms. The kind of manipulation that survived audits because it respected the language of compliance while betraying its spirit. Julia leaned back, eyes closed, letting the implications settle. This file could not be introduced as evidence. It had no chain of custody, no provenance she could defend under oath. If she attempted to use it directly, the defense would dismantle her credibility in minutes. And yet, it pointed, not to guilt, but to where guilt was buried. Her phone buzzed. She ignored it. Instead, she opened the official trial exhibits and began cross-referencing identifiers. Batch numbers, trial phases, dates that overlapped patient deaths too neatly to be coincidence. The pattern emerged slowly, inexorably. By midnight, she knew two things with certainty. First, Biopharm Solutions had manipulated test results in a way that directly correlated with fatal outcomes. Second, Mark had been positioned perfectly, knowledgeable enough to understand the implications, constrained enough by NDA to be silent. Her phone buzzed again. A text message. Unknown number. We shouldn't do this. No name. No greeting. She stared at the screen, heart rate increasing not from fear, but from clarity. They met in the parking structure beneath the courthouse the next morning. It was not romantic. It was not impulsive. It was operational. Concrete columns divided the space into blind zones. Cameras existed, but predictably. Fixed angles, easy to avoid if one knew where to stand. Julia chose the location. Mark arrived second. You sent the file, she said, without preamble. Yes. Why now? Because once I testify, he said, I lose the ability to act without destroying myself. You already risked that, she replied. He shook his head. Not yet. From the back row, a man Julia did not recognize took notes without looking at the page. His attention lingered not on the judge, nor on the attorneys, but on Mark. A sedan idled across the lot, engine running, lights off. She memorized its shape without staring. Do not contact me again unless it's an emergency, she said. Mark nodded. Define emergency. When silence stops protecting us, she replied. She drove away without checking her mirror. The next morning in court, the man from the back row had moved closer. And this time, he was no longer pretending to take notes. The man's name surfaced quietly, not in court records, not in any document Julia could subpoena. It came from an offhand remark during a procedural sidebar, two defense attorneys speaking too freely, assuming proximity equaled discretion. Security cleared it, one of them said. Rourke signed off. Julia wrote the name down without looking at it. Rourke. That afternoon, she ran it through internal channels she was not supposed to use anymore. Old favors. Old access. The kind that existed only because no one expected her to need them again. Former detective. Financial crimes. Corporate risk mitigation, which was a polite way of saying pressure specialist. From that moment on, she stopped assuming privacy. She altered her commute, changed the order of her days, left her phone in different rooms at night, not because it helped, but because it made intent harder to map. Every movement became deliberate. Mark adapted faster. He stopped arriving at court at the same time each day, altered his posture, his routines. He did not look for Julia anymore. He did not need to. Rourke, however, looked for him. The first contact was indirect. Mark noticed the coffee shop across from the courthouse, suddenly remembered his name. That the barista asked about his work with a familiarity that hadn't existed before. That a man in a dark jacket sat in the same corner 3 days in a row, always leaving before Mark did. None of it was illegal. All of it was intentional. The second contact was explicit. Rourke introduced himself in the hallway outside a private conference room. Voice calm, tone conversational. "You're hard to read," he said to Mark, extending a hand that carried no warmth. "That usually means you're hiding something. Or you're very good at your job." Mark shook his hand once. "Is this where you threaten me?" Rourke smiled faintly. "No. This is where I observe how you respond to the idea of being threatened." Julia watched the exchange from across the corridor without intervening. Any acknowledgement would only confirm interest. She noted posture, distance, timing. Rourke noticed her noticing. That night, the message arrived. Not coordinates this time. A photo. Julia and Mark exiting the motel. Not close enough to see faces clearly. Close enough to erase doubt. No text. No demands. Just proof of capacity. Julia did not call Mark. She did not reply. She went to sleep and woke up already exhausted. The following days compressed. Court. Preparation. Court again. Each cross-examination tightened the case incrementally, drawing blood without revealing the knife. Mark performed flawlessly. Too flawlessly. Rourke adjusted. The second photo was clearer. The third included a timestamp. The fourth came with a note. "We need to talk." Julia deleted it. She did not delete the next one. A manila envelope waited on her kitchen counter when she came home one evening. No sign of forced entry. No disruption. Just placement. Inside, printed stills, high resolution. Her face. Marks. No ambiguity left to exploit. And a single line, typed. "This can end quietly." The meeting took place in a private dining room of a restaurant that catered to discretion. Rourke arrived first. Julia joined him without greeting. "You've been busy," he said, gesturing to the chair opposite him. "So have you," she replied, sitting. "Trespassing carries penalties." He waved it off. "Only if you can prove it." She leaned forward slightly. "State your terms." He appreciated that. She could tell. "You soften the prosecution's theory," he said. "Shift intent to oversight. We lose money, not freedom." "And the photos?" "Disappear," he said, "along with any curiosity about how your expert witness violates his NDA." She did not blink. "You're asking me to sabotage my own case. I'm offering you a way to survive it." Silence settled. Controlled. Evaluative. "And if I refuse?" she asked. Rourke smiled again, this time without pretense. "Then we release what we have. Your career ends. He goes to prison. The company issues a statement and moves on." "You're assuming I value my career more than the truth," Julia said. "I'm assuming," he replied, "that you value consequences." She stood. "This conversation is over." "For now," he agreed. That night, she drove to the motel without turning her phone on. Mark was already there. "They came to you," he said as soon as she entered. "Yes." "They offered you an exit." "Yes." He nodded, absorbing it. "You should take it." She stared at him. "Don't." "This isn't about courage," he said. "It's about damage control." She stepped closer. "This is about whether we let them decide what matters." Their closeness this time was urgent, stripped of restraint. Not comfort, but defiance. A brief refusal to be reduced to leverage. Afterward, Julia sat on the edge of the bed, breathing steady, mind already racing ahead. "They want me afraid," she said. "And they want you isolated." Mark dressed in silence. "They'll escalate," he said. "I know." Neither of them said what escalation meant. They parted without reassurance. Outside, a car idled at the far end of the lot. Rourke was done observing. He had moved to containment. The envelope arrived at the office this time. Not her home. Not the courthouse. Her private workspace, past the receptionist, past security, placed squarely on her desk as if it belonged there. Julia stopped in the doorway. Manila. Thick. Clean edges. No return address. She closed the door behind her before opening it. Inside were photographs she had already seen. Sharper now, sequenced, annotated. Angles that suggested planning, not luck. A timeline that mapped intimacy against court dates with professional precision. And beneath them, a single document. Not a threat, an offer. A proposed amendment to the prosecution's theory of liability. Language softened just enough to redirect intent. No outright lies. Just strategic omission. The kind of revision that preserved appearances while hollowing out accountability. At the bottom, a note in plain type. Sign, or we release everything by Friday. Friday was 48 hours away. Julia sat slowly, hands flat against the desk. Her pulse remained steady. This was not panic. This was assessment. If the material went public, the case would be declared compromised before it reached verdict. Her license would be suspended pending investigation. Mark would be charged for breach of NDA, criminal, not civil. The corporation would survive intact. If she signed, no one would ever know what she had almost proven. The choice was clean, which made it obscene. She did not call Mark. Not yet. Instead, she walked into court and argued procedural motions with mechanical precision, voice level, posture unremarkable. Rourke watched from the gallery without hiding it anymore. He nodded once when she passed him. That afternoon, Mark found his office locked. Not sealed. Not rated. Simply inaccessible. A polite administrative barrier. Inside, his work computer had already been confiscated for routine compliance review. The message was clear: we own the ground beneath you. He went to the motel anyway. Julia arrived an hour later. She showed him the envelope without commentary. Mark did not touch the photos. He focused on the document. They want you to rewrite history, he said. They want me to erase intent. He nodded. That saves them. And destroys us, she replied. Silence pressed in. Not heavy, absolute. You should accept, he said finally. She looked at him sharply. Don't repeat that. I'm serious, he said. You can still walk away intact. I can't. That's not a reason, she said. That's blackmail doing its job. He leaned back against the wall. You don't owe me martyrdom. This isn't about you, she said. Or me. Or them. It's about whether the truth only matters when it's convenient. He studied her for a long moment. This will end your career, he said. Yes. And mine, he added. Yes. He exhaled. Then why hesitate? She closed her eyes briefly. Because I need to be certain. Of what? That I'm not wrong about you. That landed. His expression changed. Not defensive, not offended. Wounded, in a way that made her chest tighten despite herself. You think I planned this, he said. I think, she replied carefully, that corporations don't gamble on coincidences. And I need to know whether I was one. He stepped closer. Ask me, was the airport a setup? She asked. No, he said immediately. I was already on leave. The subpoena came later. How do I know that? You don't, he admitted. You only know that if this was a trap, I gave up everything by sending you that file. She searched his face for calculation, found only resolve and fear. That night, Julia returned home alone. She drafted 2 documents. One was the amendment Rourke wanted, perfectly phrased, legally defensible. The other was a revised cross-examination strategy, sharper, riskier, designed to force admissions without ever referencing the illicit evidence. She saved both. At 2:17 a.m., her phone vibrated. A message from Rourke. Decision time. She did not respond. Instead, she deleted the amendment. The next morning, she walked into court knowing there would be no safe exit. Only forward. The courtroom shifted its tone, not in ways most people would notice. No raised voices. No sudden objections. But the rhythm changed. Responses came faster, interruptions sharper. The defense stopped assuming inevitability. Julia had stopped giving them that luxury. Her questions narrowed. Witnesses were no longer asked what they did, but when they stopped asking why. Timelines began to misalign under pressure. Minor inconsistencies accumulated into something heavier than doubt. From the gallery, Rourke watched without expression. Mark felt it first. A tightening around him, not procedural, but personal. Defense counsel began to preface conversations. HR requested clarifications. Compliance asked him to sign a revised NDA addendum retroactively. Containment had failed. Suspicion replaced it. The message came that evening. Not from Julia. From an encrypted address he recognized. "We need to talk. Now." He almost didn't go. The motel room felt smaller than before. The air heavier. Julia stood near the window, arms crossed, jacket still on. She did not offer greeting or explanation. "Tell me everything," she said. He didn't pretend not to understand. "About what?" "About why you were chosen," she replied. "About why you were available." He took a breath. "You think I was planted?" "I think corporations don't rely on luck," she said. "And I need to know whether my entire case is compromised." He stepped forward, then stopped himself. "I didn't know you existed before that airport." "That's not what I asked." She turned to face him fully now. Her expression wasn't angry. It was colder than that, clinical. "Were you ever instructed to get close to me?" she asked. "No." "To initiate contact?" "No." "To gather leverage?" "No." The answers were immediate. Too immediate, she thought. Or perhaps that was paranoia doing its work. "Then explain this," she said, sliding a printed document across the table. An internal corporate itinerary. Mark's name highlighted. The flight number circled in red. The same flight. He stared at it, blood draining from his face. "This was approved after the fact," he said. "For reimbursement." "You're sure?" "Yes." "How sure?" "Because I booked the ticket myself," he said. "On my personal card." She held his gaze. "You could be lying." "I could," he agreed. Silence stretched. Not tense, fractured. "This case dies if you're compromised," she said. "Not publicly. Quietly. Procedurally." "And if I'm not?" he asked. "Then I'm about to destroy both of us." That landed harder than accusation. "You don't trust me," he said. "I trust logic," she replied. "And logic says this is too perfect." He nodded slowly. "Then don't trust me. Use me." She flinched despite herself. "Force the truth out of me in public," he continued. "Ask questions I can't evade without lying." "That would expose us," she said. "Yes," he replied. "But it would also expose them." She turned away again, staring out at the dark stretch of road beyond the window. "You realize what you're asking," she said quietly. "I do," he answered. "And I'm asking anyway." That night, they did not touch. They sat on opposite sides of the room, speaking only when necessary. Strategy replaced intimacy. Distance replaced comfort. When Julia left, she did not look back. The next morning, Rourke intercepted Mark outside the courthouse. "You look tired," he said conversationally. "Stress does that." Mark said nothing. "You should be careful," Rourke continued. "People under stress make confessions they don't mean." Mark met his eyes. "People under pressure tell the truth by accident." Rourke smiled. "Only if someone asks the right question." Julia was already drafting them. Not to save Mark. Not to save herself. But to end the uncertainty. By the time the court adjourned that day, she knew exactly what she would ask him on the stand. And she knew it would break everything. The courtroom was silent in a way that felt deliberate. Julia adjusted her jacket, paper notes in hand, lips pressed together. Every move was calculated. Every word poised. This was the moment she had built toward. Risk measured, stakes quantified, but nothing could simulate the tension in the air. Mark sat under the harsh light of the witness box. His folder was closed, hands folded, posture neutral. Neutral enough for anyone else. Julia saw past it. The judge called the session to order. The defense shifted, sensing a storm about to break. Julia approached the stand. "Dr. Ellison," she began, voice firm, tone deliberate. "I would like to review the test results you oversaw during the late-stage trials of Biopharm Solutions." He nodded, professional. "Of course." She opened a folder carefully. "Can you confirm that the internal reports submitted to the regulators were consistent with your raw data?" "Yes," he said. "They were consistent to the best of my knowledge." "And do you trust that the regulators verified everything independently?" she pressed, eyes locked on his. "Or do you know if certain results were altered before submission?" A flicker crossed his face, subtle, almost imperceptible. She leaned into it. "Dr. Ellison," she said, softer now. "You sent me a file last week, correct? With data not officially submitted?" He swallowed, eyes widening just enough. "Yes." "Did anyone instruct you to send it?" she asked, tone careful. "No," he replied immediately. "And why did you?" She continued, step by step, each word precise. "Was it personal? Professional? Strategic?" The courtroom leaned forward. Observers sensed a rupture in the standard, procedural flow. Everyone knew something was unfolding that wasn't in the exhibits. It was because I realized the public needed to know the truth, Mark said quietly, yet audibly, every word measured. Because the data I signed off on was manipulated. Julia's eyes stayed on him, holding, guiding. She had rehearsed this cadence. Question, hesitation, confession. Not to humiliate, to uncover. And you understand that admitting this in court places you at risk of NDA violation? She asked. Yes, he admitted. But it also confirms the wrongdoing. She paused, letting the weight sink. Silence stretched, oppressive and electric. And personally, she continued, softer now, leaning just slightly forward. You also admitted feelings for me that complicated matters? A small intake of breath. The confession was delicate, carefully balanced. But Mark nodded. Yes, that is true. Gasps, small, restrained, rippled across the gallery. Not scandalous exactly, but the professional gravity collided with human reality. Two lives intersecting at the apex of corporate wrongdoing. Julia nodded once, imperceptibly. She had asked every question necessary. Not a syllable more. Not a misstep. The record captured both professional misconduct and emotional truth, simultaneously undeniable and dangerous. Mark exhaled, visibly relieved yet rigid. He had survived without lying, without protecting himself at the cost of the truth. The defense scrambled to respond, but Julia anticipated their objections. Cross-examination had already preempted every legal maneuver to deflect responsibility. The testimony held firm under scrutiny, airtight yet devastating. The judge raised an eyebrow. The room was tense. Everyone sensed the verdict of perception even before deliberations began. Julia stepped back from the witness box. She did not look at Mark. She did not need to. They had accomplished everything without speaking of complicity between them. Strategy had replaced intimacy. Clarity replaced fear. Outside, reporters whispered. Corporate representatives consulted each other nervously. The subtle balance of power had shifted irrevocably. Mark left the stand without expression. Julia returned to her table, hands steady, mind already anticipating the next day's fallout. The storm was far from over. But for the first time in weeks, the truth was public. And they had survived it together. The day after the cross-examination, the world seemed quieter, but only superficially. Julia walked past the courthouse steps, observing the press clamor, the distant chatter of interns and clerks, and the occasional whispered speculation from colleagues. Yet her attention was elsewhere. The victory was hollow, the professional triumph undeniable, but the personal cost had already become apparent. Mark had stopped calling, stopped meeting. He moved with the precision of someone carrying invisible chains. Julia's phone buzzed once, her instincts flared. She ignored it. At the motel that evening, she opened the door to find Mark waiting. Not smiling, not relieved, just tense, controlled, a man navigating the aftermath of exposure. You're late, he said. I've been watching, she replied. Her tone was neutral, almost clipped. He shifted his weight. You think I set this up? I'm not saying that, she said. But you were too precise. Too ready. My instincts aren't wrong, Mark. I need to know if our meeting at the airport was orchestrated or coincidence. It wasn't orchestrated, he said immediately. I was on leave. I didn't know you existed. Nothing happened until the subpoena arrived. Julia studied him. Every subtle expression, every micro-movement. Her rational mind told her this was truth, but the suspicion lingered. Corporations did not gamble on luck. I want to believe you, she said. But every step since then, every calculated movement, every file, every silent coordination, it all looks like preparation. It wasn't, he said, his voice low, controlled. I acted because I had to, because the case demanded it, not because I knew you. She shook her head slightly. I want to trust that. I really do. But what if I'm wrong? What if this was a trap? Mark looked down, jaw tightening. Then I lose everything anyway. And probably drag you with me. That's exactly what terrifies me, she admitted, her voice softening slightly. Silence filled the room. Not oppressive, but diagnostic, a shared evaluation of every possible betrayal, every risk, every intention. You think I played you, he said finally. I don't know what I think, she replied. All I know is that I can't afford to miscalculate again. He nodded slowly. Then don't. Only facts. Only procedure. Julia exhaled, resting her forehead against her hand. And yet, I don't know if my heart will listen to that logic. His eyes softened, briefly. Mine doesn't either. They didn't speak after that. Words were too dangerous. Touch would have been a vulnerability. Their mutual understanding rested on discipline, restraint, and fragile trust. The night stretched on. Julia lay on the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling. Every scenario ran through her mind, each one ending with consequences she could neither fully control nor ignore. In the morning, she left without acknowledgement. Mark remained, eyes on the wall, posture rigid. Two people connected by crisis, yet separated by suspicion. Outside, the city hummed on. Corporate motors spun. Media whispers continued. But inside that fragile motel room, a subtle fracture had formed between belief and doubt, between desire and duty, between what was necessary and what was personal. This fracture would define the final confrontation, because in the coming hours, neither strategy nor truth alone could resolve what had begun in the airport. The courtroom was empty when Julia left that morning. No reporters, no staff, just the faint echo of proceedings already concluded. The verdict had landed the night before, a corporate scandal of unprecedented scope, executives held accountable, fines levied, but nothing hidden behind procedural loopholes. Biopharm Solutions would survive as a company, but its reputation was fractured beyond repair. Regulatory oversight had tightened. Policies were rewritten. Lives altered. Truth had won. Julia closed her briefcase slowly, feeling the weight of weeks lift, and simultaneously, the absence of all she had known to rely on. Her career in the prosecutor's office had ended as quietly as it had begun. Letters of commendation remained in drawers. Invitations to higher office went unanswered. She had no shield, no badge, no mantle to justify her presence in the system she had served. Mark walked out of the courthouse at the same hour, past the glare of surveillance cameras and the emptying streets. He was unburdened professionally, yet stripped of every credential that had once defined him: grants, positions, publications. Integrity had survived, status had not. They did not contact each other. Neither needed to. The bond formed in fire, through threat, deception, and moral calculation, was undeniable. Julia arrived at the airport. Not the departure terminal, not the lounges, not the bustling gates. She walked to the neutral area between arrivals and departures, the gray zone, where strangers crossed without expectation of consequence. A place of anonymity. A place that once had brought them together. Mark emerged from the crowd at the exact moment. Neither spoke. Neither hesitated. Both had learned to measure distance and consequence, to gauge intent and risk. He nodded slightly. She returned it. No words were needed. No confessions. No strategy. No files. No subpoenas. For the first time in weeks, they were merely two people. No reputations, no careers, no external stakes. The echoes of corporate threats in courtrooms remained behind them, invisible but acknowledged. He extended a hand. She took it, not formally, not ceremonially, but with recognition. The touch was brief, human, grounding. They walked together toward the concourse, slow, deliberate, matching pace, neither speaking but both aware that this time, proximity was choice, not manipulation. The airport buzzed around them. Travelers rushed. Announcements echoed overhead. The world was moving, indifferent and unstoppable. They smiled faintly, small, private, shared. Not because the danger had ended, not because the world was just, but because truth had been pursued and survived, and now, stripped of duty and expectation, they could choose what came next. The gray zone had once brought them together by coincidence. Now, it offered a clean slate. Without gowns, without shields, without compromise. And for the first time, they could meet as equals. The future remained unknown. But for the first time, it was theirs.